My parents called me a failure and laughed at my dreams. They mocked me and said I was wasting my life, but when I appeared on the cover of Forbes, they couldn't believe their eyes. Have you ever been caught in family unfair treatment or know someone? See how I turned the table around with determination. The clink of silverware against porcelain filled the room, a sound so normal and familiar, yet at that moment, it felt hollow. I sat at the far end of the dinner table, listening to the conversation swirl around me like a hurricane I was powerless to stop. My mother's voice, sharp and critical, cut through the air as she recounted every detail of my decision to leave college. "It's so reckless," she said, eyes narrowed in disapproval. "To throw away everything your father and I worked for, all that money spent on your education, and you just throw it away for a pipe dream. What are you even doing?" I couldn't even look at her. Her words were like daggers, each one landing precisely where it would hurt the most. The way she talks as if I have been getting everything on a platter of gold is alarming, but I choose not to talk back, giving her that respect. My father, who usually stayed out of these discussions, nodded in agreement, his silence louder than any rebuke. The truth was, their disappointment was something I had lived with for years. Ever since I made the choice to leave college and follow my entrepreneurial dreams, they'd treated me like I was throwing my future away. Same college where I have to work 2 extra jobs to cater for all my needs because all resources was always channeled towards the golden boy. Meanwhile, across the table, my brother Jason sat with his usual smug grin, his graduation just around the corner. He was the golden child, the one who always followed the rules, did what was expected, and was praised for every little thing. My parents' eyes glimmered as they looked at him. "Jason, you've made us so proud," my mother said, her voice sweet and full of pride. "You're going to be a great lawyer. You've got the wisdom, the stability." I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep my emotions in check. Wisdom? Stability? The words rang in my head. My brother, the one who had been handed everything on a silver platter, was being praised for living a life of predictability and conformity. I had chosen a path that was uncertain, that many would say was risky. But I believed in it. I had always believed in it. And yet, here I was, being mocked for having the courage to try something different. What's the point of taking risks if you don't have a safety net? My mother continued, her voice dripping with judgment. What's the point of dreaming big if you can't even pay your bills? What are you going to do with your life, Lily? When this whole business thing fails, what will you have left? Her words stung. They always did. But the thing was, they didn't understand. They didn't understand the sacrifices I had made. They didn't understand the sleepless nights, the countless hours spent planning my business, working on it when they thought I was just playing around. It wasn't easy, but I didn't want it to be easy. I wanted to create something of my own, something that mattered. I looked over at my brother again, and my heart twisted. Jason didn't know what it was like to have a dream that others saw as foolish, to fight for something when everyone around you told you it wouldn't work. He didn't know what it was like to be labeled the black sheep of the family, the one who couldn't fall in line. And yet, here he was, basking in their approval while I was left to defend myself and my decisions. My chest tightened as the conversation continued, my parents lavishing Jason with praise, oblivious to the pain they were causing me. It wasn't just that they didn't support my dreams, it was that they outright ridiculed them. They mocked the very thing I had worked hardest for, the thing that I believed would change my life. They didn't believe in me. And worse, they didn't believe in my ability to succeed. "You think you're going to be the next big thing?" My father's voice broke through my thoughts, dismissive and condescending. "The odds are stacked against you. You'll probably be back here in a few months, asking for a job at some firm. You're not cut out for this world." My face burned with humiliation. My father didn't even know the first thing about what it took to run a business. He couldn't see that I was building something of my own, something that didn't rely on their handouts or approval. But that was the thing about my family. They never really saw me for who I was, never truly believed in me. They saw me as the failed dreamer, the one who had to be rescued from herself. I stood up from the table, unable to take their mockery any longer. My legs felt shaky beneath me, but I forced myself to remain composed. I wasn't going to break down in front of them. Not this time. I wasn't the little girl they used to scold for wanting to break free. I was an adult, a woman with a vision. And if they couldn't see that, well, that was on them. "I'll be fine," I said, my voice steady, though it trembled inside. "I don't need your approval to succeed. I've got this." I turned and walked away, leaving the dinner table behind me, feeling their disapproving gazes burning into my back. I could hear my mother's voice calling after me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I had to keep moving forward, even if they didn't believe in me, even if they couldn't understand. "This is for me," I told myself as I made my way up the stairs to my room. "This is for my future, for the dream I'm building." But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the business. It was about proving them wrong. It was about showing them that I wasn't the failure they thought I was. And I would do it without their support. I'd built this empire without their help, and one day, they would see just how wrong they were. As I sat down at my desk, I glanced at the plans I'd spent months putting together. My startup. My vision. I could do this. I would do this. And so I began again with renewed focus, determination, and strength. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to watch my dream unfold in ways they could never have imagined. Weeks later, the sharp hum of the phone in my hand echoed in the quiet room. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding with anticipation. The deal was almost sealed. A $30 million real estate development project, the kind of opportunity most people would dream of. But here I was, on the edge of making it a reality. The moment I had been working toward for months was finally within reach. I had been doing this on my own, without anyone's support. My family still thought I was wasting my time. After all, I was just a college dropout in their eyes. The lingering words from my parents, mocking me, telling me I'd never amount to anything, still echoed in my head. But this moment, this deal, was about to prove them wrong. I didn't need their approval. I was building something solid, something real. The negotiation had been long and grueling, but I had worked tirelessly. I had spent sleepless nights, poring over contracts and proposals, analyzing every figure, every possible risk. I knew what I was doing. And now it was all about to pay off. When the phone buzzed, I took a deep breath and answered. "Lily, we've got the deal." "It's yours," said the voice on the other end. The weight of his words crashed into me, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt a rush of validation. This was it. This was my breakthrough. I had done it. I held the phone to my ear as I stared out the window, my mind racing. I had always known I could do it. Every rejection, every moment of doubt that my family had planted in my mind, it all faded into the background now. This wasn't just a win, it was a declaration. I wasn't the failure they all thought I was. I had just built the foundation of something far bigger than they could ever comprehend. As I set the phone down, the weight of the moment slowly started to sink in. The first major deal of my life, worth $30 million. It was just the beginning, I realized. There was so much more to come, so many more opportunities to grab, and I was just getting started. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into the project. The negotiations had been intense, but I knew how to navigate them now. My confidence grew with each passing day. I could see the long-term vision, and I knew exactly how to execute it. Every meeting, every call, every detail, it all felt like the steps to something bigger, something life-changing. This wasn't just about business, it was about proving to myself that I had made the right decision. I couldn't help but think back to those early days, when I first made the decision to leave college. The scorn from my parents still stung, but now it was easier to push it aside. Every moment I spent working on my business, every new client, every new opportunity, it all proved that I hadn't made a mistake. I had spent so much of my life trying to make them proud, trying to fit into their mold. But that wasn't who I was. I wasn't meant to follow the rules they set for me. I was meant to break them. And now, with this deal, I was starting to prove it to the world. My family had laughed when I told them I was going to start my own business. They mocked me, told me I was foolish to think I could succeed. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was the fact that I was succeeding on my own terms. As I walked through the office, moving between meetings and calls, I couldn't help but feel a sense of power I had never known before. This wasn't just about money or deals. It was about independence. It was about proving that I didn't need anyone to tell me I was capable. I was the one who had made this happen. I was the one who had worked for it. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that my family's rejection was looming in the background, like a shadow. They had no idea what I had accomplished. They didn't know the first thing about the deals I was closing, the plans I was making. They still saw me as that failed college dropout, the one who had abandoned the traditional path for some wild idea of success. I wanted them to know. I wanted them to see what I had built. But at the same time, I didn't need their validation anymore. The moment I had my first contract signed, the moment I saw the numbers on that first big deal, I knew I was on my way. I didn't have to prove anything to them anymore. I was proving it to myself. And then the moment came when my success began to leak into the media. I wasn't looking for the attention, but when the headline flashed across my screen, "Young Entrepreneur Secures $30 million Real Estate Development Deal," I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the recognition. It wasn't long before I started getting calls from other firms, interested in working with me, wanting to partner up. I had made a name for myself, even if the world didn't yet know who I was. And just like that, my family started hearing my name more often. They began to see my name on the headlines. And just like that, their dismissive attitudes began to shift. But it was too late. I wasn't going to chase their approval anymore. I wasn't going to beg them to see my worth. I had earned it, all on my own. And it get even intense, I didn't expect it to happen this way on the cover of Forbes. It was a quiet morning when I saw it. There, in the middle of the bustling office, a notification popped up on my phone. The title of the email alone made my pulse spike. "Congratulations, Lily. You're featured in Forbes." My heart raced as I opened the email and scrolled down to see the image, the unmistakable cover of Forbes magazine, with my face smiling back at me. The once dismissed daughter, the failure in my family's eyes, was now the very embodiment of success that they had mocked me for chasing. I felt a mix of emotions. Pride. Vindication. A sense of quiet justice that I had never experienced before. But also a flicker of anticipation. This wasn't just about me. It was about them, about my parents, the ones who had ridiculed me, who had dismissed me for pursuing my dreams. Now, they would see. The world would see. I couldn't wait for my family to find out. I could already imagine my father's face, his usual smirk replaced with shock. My mother, who had once questioned my every move, would be left speechless. They were about to realize that the path I'd chosen, the one they had scorned, had led me to places they could never have imagined. It wasn't long before the news broke. Social media was buzzing. Friends, business partners, even old acquaintances began congratulating me. I could feel their eyes on me from every corner of the world. But nothing compared to the moment I saw the news hit home, literally. It was dinner time when my parents saw it. We'd been having one of our usual awkward calls, but this time, something felt different. I had already anticipated the response, but nothing could have prepared me for the silence that followed the revelation. I had no idea how long they'd been sitting in front of the TV, the news blaring in the background, before the story about me popped up. The first time they saw my name, they didn't recognize it, probably thought it was some coincidence. Then, the picture. Their jaws dropped. I could feel the tension through the phone even before the words came. My father's voice broke the silence. Is that you, Lily?" I let the silence linger before replying. "Yes, it's me." There was no pride in his voice, no joy, no congratulations, only confusion. He asked again, his disbelief palpable. "But, you? Forbes? How is this possible?" His words were a rush of frantic disbelief. I could almost hear him trying to wrap his mind around the fact that his daughter, the one he had ridiculed and belittled for leaving school even though he never supported, was now on the cover of one of the most respected business magazines in the world. Then my mother's voice cut in. "This is unbelievable. How did we miss this?" The words stung more than they should have, but I remained calm. There was nothing to prove anymore. The magazine cover, my achievements, spoke louder than any apology they could offer. The realization slowly hit them both. Their dismissive remarks, telling me that I wasn't good enough, that I was wasting my time, that I would never amount to anything outside of the traditional path, they had been wrong. I had built something real, something they had never believed in. And now it was right in front of them. But they weren't the only ones scrambling. The realization dawned on them slowly, and the panic began to build. As their voices grew louder, it was clear they hadn't figured out the depth of my success yet. Their questions now weren't just about how I did it, but about what it meant for them. The tension between them was thick, but I wasn't interested in the details of their panic. What mattered now was what I had achieved. I didn't need them to understand my journey anymore. I had moved beyond that. Their attempts at reconciliation now felt hollow. "We always knew you'd be successful, Lily," my father said, his tone attempting to regain some semblance of control. But his words felt rehearsed, lacking the sincerity they should have carried. His voice cracked slightly. Did he really think I was going to forgive him that easily? No, I wasn't going to let them off the hook that quickly. "Don't pretend to understand now," I replied, my voice calm but firm. I had no intention of letting them in just yet. "I'm proud of what I've done. But this doesn't change everything that came before it. You've already made your choices. This is my success, my victory. Not something you can take credit for just because I'm on a magazine cover." I left for my own space. They were silent for a long time. Then the flood of calls started. 79 missed calls. 79 messages. I hadn't checked them yet, but I knew who they were from. My parents, desperate to get through. But I ignored them. Every voicemail was another attempt to claw their way back into my life. And then it wasn't just my parents. My brother, the golden child, the one they had always supported and celebrated, had reached his own breaking point. He was in debt, struggling to keep up appearances. His financial instability was now becoming painfully obvious, and there was nowhere for him to hide it. The car they had bought for him, the constant indulgence, was crumbling around him. While they had praised him for his stability, the truth was that he was nothing more than a facade, teetering on the edge of collapse. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction, not for his downfall but for my triumph despite everything. He was their perfect child, and now, as the truth of his situation came to light, the roles had reversed. While they scrambled to bail him out, I stood firm. They wanted me to help, but it wasn't going to be that easy. I had earned everything I had. My success wasn't their safety net. And they would have to understand that. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about the cars, the dinners, the vacations, or the gifts that had always seemed to come easily to them while I watched from the sidelines. This was about control. Control of my life, my future, and, most importantly, control over the narrative that had always been written for me. For years, I had quietly supported my family. My brother's debts, my parents' financial troubles, the unexpected expenses, they all came to me. I was always the one who picked up the slack, the one who stayed quiet while they praised my brother for following the right path. I had watched as my success, my hard work, and my sacrifices were never fully recognized. But now, everything had changed. I had built an empire, and my name was now synonymous with success. It was time to remind my family who they had underestimated and who they had relied on. It started small. A missed payment here, a delayed transfer there. I could feel their dependence on me, their reliance on the comfort I'd provided for so long. But they didn't see what I was doing. Not at first. Then came the phone call. It was my mother. Panic in her voice. "Lily, we need to talk. Your brother, his credit card bills, his car loan, everything is overdue. You need to help him. He's in trouble." I could feel the pressure in her voice, the desperation. But there was no sympathy in me anymore. No more understanding. Not after everything they had done. I let her ramble for a moment, recounting all the reasons my brother was in debt, how it wasn't his fault, how he'd been under so much stress. It was the same old song and dance. They had always excused him, always made it someone else's problem. But I wasn't interested in helping him this time. I wasn't interested in saving them anymore. I paused, letting the silence between us grow thick with tension. "I think it's time you and Dad face the consequences of your actions," I said, my voice calm but firm. I could almost hear the shock in her silence. "I've been funding your lives for years. Now it's time for you to figure it out without me." The words felt like a weight lifted from my chest, but the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. My mother's voice cracked when she finally spoke. You can't just, Lily, this is your brother's future. We've always helped you. You can't just leave us to deal with this. I didn't respond right away. I didn't have to. The truth was, I wasn't the naive, grateful daughter anymore. I had become the woman who had earned everything on her own. And I had grown tired of being the one who fixed their messes. Let me know when you're ready to handle it, I said, before hanging up. I set the phone down and felt a strange sense of satisfaction. My family was finally seeing the consequences of their own actions. My brother's debts were his problem now. And as much as my parents tried to make it mine, they would have to learn that their reliance on me had come to an end. As the days passed, the calls didn't stop. But I didn't answer. My phone was flooded with missed calls from my mother, my father, even my brother. They were panicking. The messages were full of pleading and excuses, all designed to manipulate me into helping them out once again. But I wasn't budging. The foundation I had built was solid now. I had worked tirelessly, faced rejection and mockery, and proven everyone wrong. It was time for my family to recognize that I was no longer the person they could use. The following week, my parents' financial situation became even more dire. The bills piled up, and the strain of their son's debts weighed heavily on them. The business they ran, a small but successful venture that had once supported their lifestyle, began to feel the effects of their overindulgence. Without my quiet financial contributions, their cushion had dissolved. They were forced to take loans they couldn't afford, and the stress started to seep into their interactions with each other. The facade they had built was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. I watched it all from a distance, feeling a deep sense of vindication. I had been their crutch for so long, and now it was clear that they were struggling without me. But there was no sense of joy in my victory, only the satisfaction of knowing I had finally freed myself from their control. I had done the hard work, built my success, and created a life that I didn't need to explain or justify. Now, my parents would see how it felt to be powerless. Meanwhile, my brother was drowning in debt, and my parents couldn't figure out how to bail him out. Their desperation was growing more apparent by the day. I saw the signs. They were getting more aggressive in their attempts to contact me, more demanding, more frantic. But I knew better than to let them pull me back into their web of dysfunction. They had made their choices, and now they had to deal with the consequences. Still, I didn't let the tension simmer. I kept moving forward, building my future with every passing day. I found myself more and more in control of my own path, feeling the power that came from finally stepping into my own identity. The woman who had once been overlooked, underestimated, and belittled was now a force to be reckoned with. And my family's scrambling only made me feel more secure in the decisions I'd made. I wasn't the one who needed them anymore. They needed me, and they didn't even know how to ask for help. The phone call came at a time when I was in the middle of signing off on the final details of my latest deal, one that would solidify my position as a leader in the real estate market. The phone buzzed relentlessly on my desk, and for a moment, I hesitated. I knew who it was. I knew the request that was coming. My brother, Jason. The one who had everything handed to him on a silver platter while I was forced to fight for every inch of success. The one who never had to prove himself, and yet, somehow, I had been the one left with the weight of my family's expectations. I picked up the phone, the sound of Jason's voice barely masking the panic beneath it. "Lily, I need your help," he said, his voice strained. I'm in over my head. I don't know what to do." There was a moment of silence as I listened to the desperation in his words. The man who had spent years in debt and excess, living the life I was supposed to have, now needed me. But I wasn't the same person I had been when I was the family's fallback, the one they came to when things went wrong. It was clear now, Jason's financial troubles were his doing, not mine. He had bought into the same entitled mindset our parents had ingrained in him. While I was building an empire, he was squandering his opportunities and living beyond his means. I'd spent too many years bailing him out, never asking for anything in return. But now the tables had turned. I listened to his pleas for a few more moments, each word slicing through me. My anger was a distant echo, replaced by something more powerful now, control. I knew what I had to do, but it wasn't going to be easy. This moment was mine, and it was time to set the rules. "I'll help you," I said, the words deliberate and final. but it will be on my terms. I've been helping you and the rest of the family for far too long. I'm no longer going to be the one you turn to for rescue. This is it, Jason. You've got to do better this time." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end. I could almost feel his surprise, the realization that I wasn't the same person who would blindly throw money at his problems anymore. He knew in that moment that his days of manipulating me were over. "Are you serious?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. "I'm deadly serious," I replied, my tone unwavering. "You wanted the life that comes with privilege. Well, now you're going to experience the reality of it. I'll help, but you'll have to earn it. This is your wake-up call, Jason." As the call ended, I sat back in my chair, the weight of the moment settling over me. This was the culmination of everything I had worked for, the moment where I no longer had to prove my worth to anyone, not even my family. I had fought for my place in the world, and now, finally, I was the one calling the shots. It felt exhilarating. But there was still more to do. My empire wasn't just about money, it was about freedom. It was about reclaiming the narrative my family had tried to write for me. As I leaned back in my office chair, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The countless hours, the rejection, the sacrifices, it had all been worth it. I could still hear the echoes of the past in my mind. The dismissive comments from my parents when I left college to follow my own path, the endless mockery, the promises of support for Jason that were never extended to me. They didn't believe in me then, and it stung. But now I was no longer seeking their approval. I had earned the respect I needed, not from them, but from the world. I glanced at the stack of paperwork on my desk, deals in the making, opportunities waiting to be seized. There was so much more ahead of me, and I wasn't going to let anything or anyone hold me back. This was my time, and I was going to make the most of it. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from my mother. The desperation in her words was evident, but I didn't feel the old familiar guilt that used to claw at me. "Lily, please, we're in a crisis. Your brother's situation is worse than we thought. You're the only one who can help him now." For a brief moment, I considered picking up the phone. It would have been easy to give in, to go back to the familiar role of caretaker. But something inside me shifted. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. I opened the message, typed a short reply, and hit send. "I'll consider it," was all I wrote. As I set my phone down, I realized that I had done something monumental. I wasn't just securing my business's future, I was securing my personal peace. I had taken back control of my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone drag me back into the old patterns of sacrifice without recognition. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The attention on my success grew, and I began to see the fruits of my labor in the form of lucrative contracts and offers. My reputation in the real estate world soared, and with it, my confidence. I wasn't just a successful businesswoman, I was a force to be reckoned with. But as my empire grew, so did the realization within my family that they couldn't continue to manipulate me. They had no choice but to acknowledge my success, and for the first time, I could feel their admiration. It wasn't the unconditional support I had once craved, but it was something different. It was respect. It was acknowledgement of my strength and my ability to stand on my own 2 feet. And as for Jason? He came back to me a few months later, admitting the magnitude of his mistakes. His debts were still mounting, and he was slowly coming to terms with the reality of his actions. I agreed to help him, but I made it clear that this was his last chance. In the end, I didn't need their approval or their validation. I had already won. I had built my empire, not for them, but for me. And I was ready to move forward, leaving behind the toxic dynamics of my past. As I stood in front of my sleek new office building, watching the city bustle around me, I knew this was just the beginning. My story wasn't defined by their rejection. It was defined by my determination, my resilience, and my unwavering belief that I could achieve anything. And I had. I was no longer the girl who needed anyone's approval. I was a woman who had carved her own path, and with every step I took, the world could see it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe.